The shot echoed across the Texas Panhandle like thunder splitting the night sky. Abigail Steele stood on the barn roof, smoke curling from her Winchester's barrel, watching Red Maddox's second-in-command tumble from his saddle. The outlaw hit the dirt hard, clutching his shoulder and screaming curses that cut through the chaos below. 5 more riders circled her corral, torches blazing, their shadows dancing like demons across 200 head of panicked cattle. That was a warning. Abby's voice rang clear over the lowing herd. The next one won't be. Cole Maddox wheeled his black stallion toward the barn, his scarred face twisted in rage. You just killed yourself, lady. But Abby was already moving, dropping behind the roof's weathered planks as bullets splintered the wood where she'd stood. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. They had to. Everything she'd fought for in the 2 years since Thomas died lived and breathed in that corral. She'd be damned if she'd let these vultures take it. The wind carried the acrid smell of burning hay. One of the outlaws had set her haystack ablaze, flames licking toward the sky, casting everything in hellish orange light. The cattle were starting to stampede, their hooves pounding the earth like war drums. If they broke through the fence, they'd scatter across the Panhandle, and she'd never get them back. She'd lose everything. Jed, Hank, Abby called down to the 2 ranch hands crouched behind the water trough. Keep them pinned. I'm going for the fire. Boss, that's suicide. Young Jed's voice cracked with fear. Blood seeped through the bandana wrapped around his arm, where a stray bullet had grazed him minutes earlier. His face, usually sun-bronzed and eager, had gone pale as milk. Stay down and cover me. Abby didn't wait for an argument. She swung off the barn roof, boots hitting the ladder rungs, and dropped the last 6 feet to the ground. A bullet whined past her ear. Another kicked up dirt at her heels. She ran anyway, legs pumping, rifle clutched tight, the world narrowing to a single burning point. That haystack, maybe 20 yards away, flames already spreading toward the corral fence. Grizzled Hank rose from behind the trough, his colt barking 3 times in quick succession. An outlaw yelped and dove for cover. It bought Abby the seconds she needed. She reached the water trough by the corral, grabbed the bucket hanging there, and scooped it full. The water sloshed cold against her hands as she ran toward the flames, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Heat hit her face like a physical blow. The fire crackled and hissed, hungry, spreading fast along the dry grass. She hurled the water at the base of the flames. Steam exploded upward. Not enough. Not nearly enough. She ran back, filled the bucket again, threw it. Again. Again. Her arms screamed. Smoke burned her lungs. Behind her, gunfire cracked like breaking bones. Abby, look out. Hank's warning came too late. A rope lashed around her shoulders, yanking tight. She crashed face first into the dirt, the bucket clattering away. Before she could roll, hands grabbed her, hauling her up. The rope bit into her arms, pinning them to her sides. Cole Maddox loomed over her, his breath reeking of whiskey and rot. Up close, the scar that earned him his nickname looked like someone had tried to carve his face in half. It ran from his left eye to his jaw, puckered and white against weather-beaten skin. His eyes, though, his eyes were what made men afraid. Cold, dead, like looking into an empty well. Thought you could fight us? Cole's laugh was gravel scraping metal. You're just one woman playing at ranching. This is a man's world, sweetheart. Time you learn that. He yanked the rope tighter. Abby gasped, stars exploding across her vision. The heat from the spreading fire scorched her back. In the corral, her cattle surged and bellowed, hooves thundering against the fence posts. Any moment now, they'd break through. Your herd's mine now, Cole hissed, leaning close. And this ranch, I'll burn it to ash. Should have sold when you had the chance. Abby's mind raced. The Derringer. Thomas had given it to her their first anniversary, made her promise to keep it hidden in her boot. For emergencies, he'd said, his hand warm on hers. Pray you never need it, but if you do, don't hesitate. She'd carried it every day since he'd died. Never had to draw it. Until now. You're right about one thing, Abby said, her voice steadier than she felt. This is a man's world. She met Cole's dead eyes without flinching. But I'm done asking permission to live in it. Her boots shifted. The rope around her arms was tight, but Cole had made a mistake. Her hands weren't completely pinned. She could still move her fingers. Could still reach. Tough words from a dead woman. Cole raised his revolver, pressing the barrel against her temple. The metal was hot from recent firing. Any last prayers? Just one. Her hand shot down, fingers closing around the derringer's pearl handle. She yanked it free, twisted her wrist up through the small gap in the rope, and fired. The shot rang true. Cole's eyes went wide. He staggered back, hand flying to his shoulder where blood bloomed dark across his shirt. The revolver fell from his grip. His mouth worked soundlessly, shock written across his ruined face. Abby didn't stop moving. She drove her shoulder into his chest, sending him sprawling, then spun toward the remaining outlaws. Your boss is down. Get off my land, or join him. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The outlaws stared at their fallen leader. Jed and Hank emerged from cover, weapons raised. The fire crackled behind them, casting everything in hellish light. 200 cattle bellowed their terror. Then hoofbeats thundered from the east. A lot of them. Riders burst over the ridge, at least a dozen strong. Abby's heart sank. More outlaws. She'd fought so hard, come so close, and now. That's the Broken Spade brand. Jed shouted. It's McAllister. Samuel McAllister, the neighboring rancher, led the charge. His weathered face was grim as he took in the scene. The burning haystack, the wounded outlaw on the ground, Cole Maddox bleeding in the dirt, and Abby standing over him with a smoking derringer. Heard gunfire from my north pasture, McAllister said, reining up hard. Figured you might need a hand. His eyes swept the remaining outlaws. You boys want to run, or you want to hang? Choose quick. My patients died about 5 miles back. The outlaws chose running. 3 of them bolted for their horses, spurring hard into the darkness. McAllister's men gave chase, lassos spinning. The last 2 outlaws, seeing no escape, dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Tie them up, McAllister ordered. His men moved fast, efficient. Then the rancher turned to Abby, tipping his hat. Ma'am, you all right? Abby became aware, suddenly, of how she must look. Covered in dirt and soot, rope burns on her arms. Derringer still clutched in her shaking hand. Her legs wanted to give out. Her chest felt tight. But she stood straight, met McAllister's eyes, and nodded. I'm fine, but I need to save my herd. She turned back to the fire. It had spread along the fence line, flames eating the dry wood. If it reached the corral posts, the whole structure would collapse. The cattle would scatter into the night, and days of roundup wouldn't bring them all back. Not in this drought. Not with predators and other ranchers' herds mixing them up. Form a bucket line, McAllister shouted. Save that fence. What followed was a blur of motion. Men rushed between the well and the fire, passing buckets hand to hand. Abby threw herself into the work, ignoring the pain in her arms, the burn in her lungs. She scooped and threw, water hissing against flames. Beside her, Jed worked despite his wounded arm. Hank cursed steadily, creatively, his voice a constant rumble. Slowly, impossibly, the flames died. The fence held. The cattle, sensing the danger passing, began to settle. Their bellowing quieted to anxious lowing. Steam rose from blackened wood and scorched earth. Abby stood in the ruins of her haystack, chest heaving, and watched the last embers fade. McAllister appeared at her elbow, offering a canteen. She drank deep, the water cool and sweet as salvation. Thank you, she said. I mean it. If you hadn't come, you'd have found a way. McAllister's voice was gruff, but kind. You always do. That's what folks are saying about you, anyway. The lady rancher who won't quit. He paused, studying the scene. You dropped Red Maddox. That'll make you famous from here to Amarillo. Abby looked at where Cole lay, now tied and guarded. He was conscious, glaring at her with pure hatred. She felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just bone-deep weariness and the quiet certainty that she'd do it all again if she had to. I just wanted to keep my herd, she said softly. And you did. McAllister gestured at the corral, where 200 head of cattle stood safe behind intact fences. That takes guts. Skill too. Your husband would be proud. The words hit harder than she expected. Abby's throat tightened. She looked away, blinking hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. Thomas. God, she missed him. Missed his steady presence, his quiet confidence. The way he believed she could do anything. She'd had to learn to believe it herself. Boss. Jed approached, his wounded arm properly bandaged now. He looked exhausted but alive with excitement. The cattle are settling. We didn't lose a single head. Good work. Abby managed to smile. Both of you. Couldn't have held them without you. Couldn't have run without you leading, Hank said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. That shot you made? Best I've seen in 40 years of ranching. You're one hell of a woman, Miss Abby. Coming from Hank, who worked cattle drives since before she was born and had never once called her anything but ma'am, with barely concealed skepticism, it meant everything. The law arrived at dawn, just as pink light crept over the eastern horizon. Sheriff Carson rode in with 2 deputies, their badges catching the early sun. They took one look at the scene. The bound outlaws, Cole Maddox slumped against a fence post with his shoulder bandaged, and let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned," Carson said. "We've been chasing Red Maddox for 3 years. Lost his trail 2 weeks back. And here he is, gift-wrapped." He turned to Abby. "Ma'am, I'm going to need your statement." Abby told the story, start to finish. Carson took notes, nodding occasionally. When she described the final confrontation, how Cole had her dead to rights before she drew the derringer, his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "You shot him point blank while tied up?" "It was him or me, Sheriff. I chose me." "Can't argue with that." Carson snapped his notebook shut. "This is clear self-defense. You and your hands will need to come to town, give official statements, but I don't see any charges. Hell, there's probably a reward. Maddox and his gang hit 4 ranches this month alone. Killed 2 men in the last raid." The words settled over Abby like a heavy blanket. She could have died. Should have died, maybe, by any reasonable measure. 1 woman, 2 ranch hands, against 6 armed outlaws. The odds had been impossible, but she'd made them possible anyway. The outlaws were loaded into a wagon, headed for Amarillo's jail. Cole Maddox glared at Abby as they pulled him up. "This ain't over," he snarled. "I got friends. They'll come for you. Let them come." Abby's voice was iron. "They'll learn the same lesson you did. You can't take my herd. You can't burn my ranch. And you sure as hell can't break me." She stepped closer, meeting his dead eyes one last time. "This land is mine. My husband left it to me, and I've earned it with blood and sweat. Anyone who thinks otherwise is welcome to try what you tried. They'll end up exactly where you're headed." Cole had no answer for that. The wagon rolled away, carrying him toward justice. McAllister stayed until mid-morning, helping repair the damaged fence and check the herd. His men worked alongside Jed and Hank, the camaraderie easy despite being strangers hours ago. That was the way of the frontier. You helped your neighbors, because someday you'd need help yourself. "You're welcome at the Broken Spade anytime," McAllister said as he prepared to leave. "And if you need hands for roundup, send word. I'll make sure you have them." "I appreciate it." Abby shook his hand, her grip firm. "I won't forget this. Just keep being who you are. The Panhandle needs more ranchers like you. Ones with spine." He mounted his horse, gathering the reins. "And Miss Steele? That shot you made, taking down Maddox? Folks will talk about that for years. You're a legend now, whether you want it or not." He rode off, his men following. The thunder of hoofbeats faded into silence. Abby stood in her ranch yard, surveying the damage. Scorched earth where the haystack had been. Bullet holes in the barn. Bloodstains in the dirt. But her herd grazed peacefully in the corral, safe and whole. She'd won. The realization hit her all at once. Her knees went weak. She sat down hard on the porch steps, the derringer still tucked in her belt, and let out a long, shaky breath. Reaction set in. Her hands trembled. Her stomach churned. She'd killed a man. Well, wounded him badly. Close enough. "Boss." Jed sat beside her, moving gingerly to favor his injured arm. "You okay?" "I will be." Abby looked at him, really looked. He'd been 18 when Thomas hired him, eager but green as spring grass. Now he was a man, proven in fire. "How's the arm?" "Doc says I'll live. Bullet just kissed me." He hesitated. "I'm sorry I froze up there at the beginning. When they first came, You held your ground when it mattered. That's what counts." Abby squeezed his shoulder. "You've got a job here as long as you want it, Jed. You proved yourself tonight." Pride flashed across his young face. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down." Hank joined them, lowering himself onto the steps with a grunt. "Well, that was more excitement than I've had in a decade. My back's going to hate me tomorrow." He pulled out his tobacco pouch, packed his cheek. "But damn if it wasn't worth it. Taught those bastards a lesson they won't forget." The 3 of them sat in companionable silence, watching the sun climb higher. The cattle settled into their routine, grazing and chewing cud. Birds returned, singing in the cottonwoods. The world went on, indifferent to the violence that had nearly destroyed everything. But Abby had saved it. She'd stood her ground, made her shot, and proven she belonged here. Over the following weeks, word spread. The lady rancher who'd brought down Red Maddox became frontier legend. Other ranchers tipped their hats when she came to town. The bank manager, who'd tried to foreclose 3 times, suddenly offered favorable loan terms. Buyers came from as far as Kansas City, wanting to deal with the woman who defended her herd against impossible odds. Abby's ranch prospered. She hired 2 more hands, expanded her herd, secured water rights to a creek that doubled her grazing land. The respect she'd fought so hard to earn came freely now, offered without question or doubt. But the greatest change was internal. When Abby looked in the mirror, she no longer saw Thomas's widow, struggling to fill boots too big for her. She saw a rancher, a fighter, a woman who'd faced death and made it blink first. She'd proven what she'd always known but had been afraid to fully believe. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. One evening, 3 months after the raid, Abby stood on her porch at sunset. The sky burned gold and crimson, painting the grassland in fire. Her herd grazed peacefully, over 300 head now. Jed and Hank were at the bunkhouse, playing cards and arguing good-naturedly. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the scent of beans and cornbread. Home. This was home, built by her hands, defended with her blood, earned through grit and determination. The Derringer hung on the wall inside, mounted in a simple frame. She rarely looked at it. Didn't need to. Its lesson was carved into her bones. When you're backed into a corner, when everything you love is threatened, when the odds are impossible and the world says you can't win, you have a choice. You can surrender, or you can fight. Abigail Steele had made her choice that night on the barn roof, again in the dirt with Cole Maddox's gun to her head, and every day since. She'd chosen to fight, to stand her ground, to protect what was hers with everything she had. She'd chosen herself, and in the end, her shot had rung true. Not just the bullet that dropped Cole Maddox, but the shot she'd taken at an impossible dream. Running a ranch in a man's world, surviving against long odds, proving that strength came in many forms and courage knew no gender. The Texas Panhandle was hard country. It broke the weak and tested the strong. But Abby had been tested and refused to break. She'd bent, yes, bloodied and bruised and pushed to her limits. But she'd straightened again, stronger than before. As stars began to prick the darkening sky, Abby whispered words only the wind could hear. I did it, Thomas. I kept our dream alive, and I'll keep fighting for it, every single day, for as long as I draw breath. The wind carried her words away, out across the grassland, over her grazing herd, toward a horizon that held nothing but possibility. Abby Steele had defended her herd and claimed her place in the history of the American West. But more than that, she'd claimed herself. And that, in the end, was the real victory.